friends, welcome back to Food Prep Guide. What if I told you that your great-grandmother, just as an example, could feed a family of 8 with ingredients that were meant for 4 and everyone still walked away satisfied? She wasn't magic and she didn't have secret ingredients that you can't get. She simply knew some fundamental kitchen skills that most of us have forgotten. Today, families spend more on groceries than ever before. Now, a good reason for that is inflation, which is beyond our control. But part of it is lost knowledge that our grandparents knew to use up what they had and make every ingredient count. Those old world techniques that previous generations used can decrease your grocery bill by at least 30%, if not more, while making your meals more satisfying and more nutritious. I'm about to share 5 skills that will help you cook on a budget once you master them. We're talking about turning a single chicken into 6 different meals, making your produce last weeks instead of days, and creating rich restaurant-quality sauces from ingredients you already have in your pantry, and more. By the end of this video, you'll know how to cook like your great-grandmother did, making every ingredient work harder, every meal stretch further, and every dollar count. Let's get started. I wanted to start with something that can literally cut your protein cost by 80%. Now, if you're a meat eater, you want meat, I get it. We're a meat-eating family. But in a pinch, when times are tough and it's all about feeding your people as cheaply as possible, it's beans. A 1-pound bag of dried beans costs around $2 and gives you the equivalent protein of 8 cans of beans, which would cost around $12 to $16 at the store depending on where you live. Now, a lot of people avoid dried beans because they think they're too much work or take too long to make, and I get that. So I'm going to show you 2 methods, the traditional way and a shortcut that gets dinner on the table in under an hour, even when you're using dried beans. First, the traditional overnight method. Take your dried beans and sort through them. Remove any stones or shriveled beans. Rinse them well and then cover with water about 2 inches above the bean line and let them soak overnight. The next day, drain and rinse your beans. Put them in a large pot and cover with fresh water again about 2 inches above the beans. And here's a tip. Add a bay leaf and maybe some onion for good flavor, but don't add any salt yet. Salt can actually make the skins tough if added too early. Bring all of that to a boil and then reduce to a gentle simmer. Depending on the bean type, they'll cook anywhere from between 45 minutes to 2 hours. The bigger the bean, the longer it takes. You'll know they're done when you can easily mash a bean against the side of your pot with either a fork or a spatula. Now, here are a few ideas for what a week of meals might look like for frugal cooking with beans. They can become the base for at least 5 different meals. Tonight, you might make black bean and rice balls. Tomorrow, you can mash some for refried beans and have tacos. The next day, you can toss them into soup. Later in the week, you can make a cold bean salad for lunch, or you could toss any remaining beans into a stir fry for supper. But what if you forgot to soak your beans? Or you only have an hour before dinner needs to be served. This is where a pressure cooker, like an Instant Pot, becomes your best friend for budget cooking. Take your dried beans, rinse them well, and put them directly into the pressure cooker. Add enough water to submerge them by at least 2 inches. In general, you want about 3 cups of water for every 1 cup of beans. Add your seasonings, but remember, still no salt. You can salt them later. And here's the important part. Add a little oil, about a tablespoon or so. We use olive oil, but the oil kind doesn't really matter. It's about the oil structure. It helps reduce the foaminess of the beans, and it will help prevent any issues with foam buildup during the pressure cooking process. Here's a chart for cooking times. If you don't see your bean type listed, match its size to its closest relative in the list and judge your time based on that. In less than an hour from dried bean to dinner, you have perfectly cooked beans that cost a fraction of canned ones and taste infinitely better. Here's one last tip before we move on. Always cook more beans than you need at the moment. They keep in the fridge for up to a week and freeze beautifully for up to 6 months. So even if you aren't into canning, you can still have the convenience of canned beans, but at the much lower cost of dried ones. Of course, you can certainly can beans, and we do have a tutorial for that on the channel. I'll link it in the description box below. Okay, skill number 2 is using a whole chicken completely. This might be the most important skill for budget cooking that I can think of. A whole chicken costs significantly less per pound than parts, but most people only think about the obvious, which is roast it and eat it. But that's just the beginning. When you buy a whole chicken, you're actually buying up to 6 meals, not one. Here's one way you could break it down. Meal number 1 could be the typical roast chicken dinner. Season it well, salt, pepper, herbs, maybe some lemon. Roast it at 425 degrees Fahrenheit or cook it in your air fryer. This feeds a family of 5 with leftovers as long as I serve 2 to 3 dishes or side dishes with it, which is important because that leaves me with more chicken to work with in the future. As far as how long to cook it, that's going to depend on the size of the bird. Usually there are instructions on the package. If not, just go until the internal temperature hits 165 degrees Fahrenheit, which you can tell easily with a meat thermometer. Okay, so meal number 2 could be chicken salad or sandwiches. All that leftover meat from the breast and thighs becomes chicken salad, chicken sandwiches, or just gets served on top of a green salad. Meal number 3 is some form of chicken soup or stew, and that's where most people stop, and they're missing the best part, the carcass, the bones, the skin, and the meat scraps. That's liquid gold. So take your chicken bones and put them in a slow cooker or a roaster oven or a large pot on your stovetop. Add any vegetable scraps that you might have, any onion bits, carrot peels, celery tops, maybe that you've been saving in a freezer bag. And if you haven't been doing that, here's your sign that you should. So cover all of that with water until everything is submerged. Add a splash of vinegar to help draw out the minerals from the bones if you like, and let it simmer for 12 to 24 hours. You'll end up with a rich, gelatinous bone broth that would cost you $6 to $8 per container at the store. And typically from one chicken, you can get 8 to 10 cups of this broth. And then that broth becomes meal number 4, a chicken and rice soup or a chicken noodle soup. Use your broth, add any remaining chicken bits, some rice or pasta, vegetables, and you have a completely different meal. Meal number 5 could be a risotto base. Use that rich broth and makes an incredible risotto that tastes like you spent hours making the stock. And last but not least, meal number 6 is the cooking liquid that's left over. Use that broth instead of water when you are reconstituting anything dehydrated. You can use it when cooking rice or quinoa or any of your other grains when it calls for water. Use that broth instead. It adds incredible flavor and no extra cost. In case you need a little bit more convincing, let's break down the numbers. A whole chicken might cost around $8. Store-bought broth would cost you $20 to $24 for the equivalent amount that we made. Now, a rotisserie chicken costs between $6 to $8, but you get a lot less meat. And the chicken parts for the same amount of meat would cost somewhere between $12 to $15. So from that $8 chicken, you're getting anywhere between $30 to $40 worth of convenience products plus 6 meals instead of 1. And that's just one of the many ways that your great-grandmother fed more people on less money. Okay, skill number 3 is mastering a basic white sauce. This might sound kind of fancy, but a basic white sauce is actually the simplest thing in the world, and it's the key to never buying expensive convenience products again. Once you master this, you can make your own cream of soups, cheese sauces, gravies, and more for pennies on the dollar. The basic formula is simple. It's 2 tablespoons of fat to 2 tablespoons of flour to 1 cup of liquid, and that's it. Master that ratio, and you have unlocked dozens of expensive store-bought products. Here's one way to make it. Heat 2 tablespoons of butter, that'd be the fat, in a pan over medium heat. Sprinkle in 2 tablespoons of flour and whisk it together. Let it bubble for about a minute. This cooks out the raw flour taste. Now slowly add 1 cup of milk for the liquid, whisking constantly to prevent lumps. Keep stirring as it heats and as it thickens, and once it coats the back of a spoon, your basic white sauce is ready. At this point, you can create endless variations. For example, add some dehydrated mushrooms, salt, pepper, and onion powder to the white sauce, and you've just made cream of mushroom soup for about 50 cents instead of $2 a can. Or add chicken broth powder and parsley to the white sauce, and now you have cream of chicken that's faster and cheaper than the canned version. Or stir grated Parmesan cheese into your white sauce along with some garlic powder, salt, and white pepper. You've just made restaurant-quality Alfredo for the cost of just milk, butter, and flour. And cheese, Parmesan cheese. Also, mac and cheese sauce. You can make and add your favorite cheese to your basic white sauce. Cheddar works wonderfully, but when you're making it home, the sky's the limit. a tiny squirt of mustard. Trust me on this. I know it's a little bit strange, but I'm talking about plain classic yellow mustard. Just a tiny little squirt. It makes it taste better. It gives it that yellow color, and it really just draws out the flavor of the cheese, as weird as it sounds. But do that, and you've just made mac and cheese sauce for about 75 cents instead of $3 to $4 for the boxed version that's loaded with all sorts of not so great ingredients. Or here's another example, add beef broth powder instead of milk. So beef broth powder mixed with water to make like a beef broth and use that as your liquid instead of milk. And now you have a rich brown gravy that costs pennies to make. Also for sausage gravy, instead of butter, you can use sausage drippings for your fat, and then move forward with your flour and your milk, season it with some good pepper, and you have restaurant-style sausage gravy that would cost $7 plus at a diner. The beautiful thing about mastering white sauce is that you'll never need to buy another one of those cans of cream of soups again. This one basic technique replaces all of those. Now, real quick, before we move on to the next skill, if you want to build a pantry that will, at any given time, allow you to whip up frugal meals because you already have all the key essentials on hand, I want to recommend our book, Food Prep Guide, A Plan for Money-Saving, Self-Sustaining Abundance in Hard Times. It will help you build a pantry that sustains your family on a budget. And in addition to the methods and strategies, it's actually a workable book, meaning inside it contains charts and trackers and more that you can write in to help you implement everything you're learning. If you want to check it out, comment Food Prep Guide in the comments below. I'll send you the link so you don't have to go fishing for it in the description box. Okay, on to skill number 4, stretching meals like Grandma did. This is where she really had things honed in. She could take ingredients that were maybe meant for 4 people and somehow feed 8 and nobody left hungry. The key was using strategic additions that made meals feel more satisfying. But let's not call them cheap fillers. That makes it sound like we're cutting corners or using highly processed foods. Think of these as hearty, satisfying components that make people feel full and happy. So number 1, potatoes. They are your best friend here. Add diced potatoes to soups and stews and casseroles. They absorb flavors beautifully and turn a small amount of meat into a filling meal. A $2 bag of potatoes can stretch expensive ingredients into 3 times as many servings. Now number 2 is rice. It's another champion in the pantry. Instead of serving a small portion of expensive protein, serve it over rice. Beef stir-fry becomes much more filling and satisfying when there's plenty of rice underneath it. Same with a leftover roast can become a completely new meal when you turn it into roast rice bowls. And number 3, we've already covered beans. They add protein and fiber while stretching more expensive ingredients. Add white beans to chicken soup, black beans to taco meat, or chickpeas to a curry. Now, besides filler, another way to stretch meals is by having a second meal mindset. And this is crucial. As much as possible, always cook with the next meal in mind. Nana didn't just make Sunday roast. She made Sunday roast knowing it would be Monday soup and Tuesday sandwiches. When you roast a chicken, immediately think about tomorrow's chicken salad. When you make rice, make extra, because tomorrow you can serve fried rice with any leftover vegetables and throw in a couple eggs. That pot of beans that you cooked, half goes into some chili, some more gets mashed into refried beans for later in the week. You can even make some bean patties for another meal, serve it with cornbread. The list goes on. Everything has a second life. The last method is strategic leftovers, which is kind of the same but a little bit different. Here's what I mean by strategic. Don't just hope that you'll have good leftovers. Go ahead and plan for them. Cook extra starches like your rice, potatoes, pasta. These transform easily into completely different dishes and fill people up. Extra mashed potatoes can become potato pancakes later. Leftover rice becomes fried rice or rice pudding, and extra pasta becomes pasta salad for lunch or gets tossed into a soup. The key is cooking starches that transform well, not just protein that you have to reheat and eat the same way over and over. And the secret isn't giving people less food, it's giving them more filling food. A small portion of expensive meat over a generous portion of seasoned rice with vegetables feels like abundance and not scarcity. Okay, skill number 5 is making produce last longer. This can literally save you hundreds of dollars a year. Just think about how many times you've had to throw away expensive berries covered in mold or lettuce because it turned to mush. That's money you can regain by simply making them last longer, which gives you more time to use it. So I'm going to divide this tip into two sections: salad greens and then all of the other refrigerated produce like berries, broccoli, cauliflower, celery, etc. Let's start with produce in general, and then we'll come back to the salad greens. Produce like berries arrive with invisible bacteria and mold spores already on their surface. Your fridge's moisture then creates the perfect breeding ground for mold growth. So to make produce last longer, we need to stop it or significantly hinder, at least, the growth of mold. And that's where food-grade hydrogen peroxide comes in. You need food-grade hydrogen peroxide, not the brown bottle drugstore kind, because it has additives. But food-grade version breaks down into just water and oxygen, which leaves no harmful residues or weird-tasting aftertaste. So here's the basic process. You want to mix 3% food-grade hydrogen peroxide with water at a ratio of 1 part peroxide to 10 parts water. Now, for the record, I don't actually measure. I take a large bowl and fill it about 3/4 of the way full with water, and then add about a cup of peroxide. Soak your produce for around 2 minutes. You really don't want to go much longer than that. The goal is to let the hydrogen peroxide have enough time to neutralize surface contaminants without affecting the structure of the produce, like making it soggy. So after it's soaked, drain the produce and let them air dry completely. Any remaining moisture can make it spoil faster. Once completely dry, store them in a closed container lined with a paper towel to absorb any remaining moisture. When this is done correctly, produce can stay fresh and mold-free for up to 3 weeks. Now let's talk about making lettuce greens last 6 weeks. This method has completely changed how I handle fresh greens. Instead of lasting a few days to maybe a week, properly stored greens can stay crisp and fresh for up to 6 weeks. So first, wash your greens really well. A salad spinner makes this so much easier. You can get them much drier than just rinsing and draining, and much cleaner. The key overall is to get them clean, but still slightly damp. Not soaking wet, but not bone dry either. And yes, this is totally different from the previous method we just discussed. We need a little bit of moisture here, but we also still need some paper towels. I've switched to using reusable bamboo paper towels because I was going through too many regular ones, but standard paper towels work just fine. Lay your clean, slightly damp greens in a single layer on the paper towels. They can overlap. It doesn't need to be, perfect. Roll up the paper towels with the greens inside. Just to note, I tested this by waiting until the greens were completely dry before packaging, and also packaging them immediately after washing while still slightly damp. For whatever reason, the slightly damp method works better and lasts longer. So put your rolled packages in a gallon-sized freezer bags. They don't have to be freezer bags. They can be regular bags. We actually use a reusable silicone bags for this. I can typically fit about 4 rolls into one of these bags. Before sealing, roll out as much air as possible to get it as airtight as you can. And then store that bag in the refrigerator. And you can, when you go to make a salad, you can just grab out 1 roll of paper towels. It's about the size of a salad. And doing it this way, the greens can stay fresh for up to 6 weeks. I've tested this with lettuce, kale, arugula, all the salad greens, and they all last pretty equally well. A bag of salad mix costs anywhere between $3 and $4, and even more if it's organic. If it only lasts a few days and you don't use it all, you end up throwing away the rest of those greens, which is throwing away money. But if it lasts 6 weeks, you can buy when it's on sale and use every bit. Same thing goes with homegrown greens, like if you need to harvest a lot before they grow bitter or bolt. And that is it, friends. This isn't about going back to the good old days. It's about bringing the wisdom of those days into our modern kitchens. The math is compelling. Families who cook this way can spend up to 50% less on groceries while still eating better food. But more than that, you gain confidence in the kitchen with these skills. They take a little practice, but once you have them, they are yours for life. And they'll save you thousands of dollars over the years while feeding your family better than any convenience product ever could. Start with one skill this week, maybe cook a batch of dried beans or try making your own white sauce. Master that, then add another skill. Within a month, you'll be cooking like your great-grandmother, and your grocery budget will thank you for it. That's all for today. We'll see you next time. Bye!